In St. Petersburg the winter stayed, cold in the lab where the young man stayed. Glass and flame and a careful hand, measuring truths he could understand. He wore a coat for the work of men, healing the sick and the wounded then. Daylight hours were not his own. Music lived where the night had grown. They said, be steady, be sharp, be wise. Trust what you see with your measured eyes. But somewhere deep in the quiet room, a different voice began to bloom. Not for the court, not for the fame, not for a critic to praise his name, but for a sound that could bend and rise, like a human voice that never lies. He was a doctor, a man of science, working in truth and quiet defiance. But when the bow met the string just right, he found his voice in the falling night. Not for glory, not for gold, but for a story the strings could hold. He taught young women to learn and heal, gave them a place that the world would steal, built them a school in a harder time, when doors were closed by an older line. In crowded halls and a life so full, he carried both, though the strain would pull. Science by day and by night aflame, a quiet man with a hidden name. He never chased what the others sought. Music was something you lived, not bought. Written in moments the time allowed, far from the stage and the gathered crowd. A quartet line in a borrowed hour, soft as breath, but it held its power. Passed from hand into another's care, like something living in open air. He was a doctor, a man of science, working in truth and quiet defiance. But when the bow met the string just right, he found his voice in the falling night. Not for glory, not for gold, but for a story the strings could hold. They say he died in a crowded room, music unfinished, cut too soon. But still that line moves hand to hand, more than he ever could have planned. He was a doctor, a man of science, never a life lived in pure compliance. And in between what the world required, he wrote the lines that never tired. Not for glory, not for fame, but for the voice that outlives a name.